The sun had just set behind the towering trees of the dense forest, leaving only the faintest traces of light slipping through the thick canopy above. In the shadows, a team of researchers gathered around a flickering campfire. The cold night air nipped at their skin, but it wasn't the chill that made them uneasy. No, it was something far more primal, something that had always been there, lurking just beyond the edges of their perception. They had been tracking Sasquatch for weeks, studying reports of strange, monstrous creatures seen by locals. These reports were dismissed as myth, superstition, or the ramblings of isolated mountain folk. But as the team trekked deeper into the wilderness, they began to see strange things, disturbing things that couldn't be explained away by logic or science. Then, on that fateful night, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of something massive moving through the underbrush, snapping branches and rustling the leaves. But when they turned their flashlights in the direction of the noise, they saw nothing. "I'm telling you," one of the researchers, Dr. Collins, whispered, his voice strained with tension. "We're not alone out here." They had come to the forest to track down what they believed to be a simple animal, perhaps a giant ape or a primate, known to the locals as Sasquatch. What they didn't expect was the growing sense of being watched. Everywhere they went, there was a feeling, a presence, that followed them like a shadow. It wasn't a trick of the wind or a figment of their imagination. It was real. Each night, as they set up camp, the feeling grew stronger, more oppressive. There were subtle signs of something big moving just out of sight. Huge, human-like footprints left behind in the mud, branches hanging unnaturally low, as though something tall had passed through. But still they saw nothing. On the fourth night, after a full day of trekking, the team had finally set up their equipment for another long night of observation. They positioned cameras around the perimeter of their campsite, hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature, or at least hear its distinctive growl. But no one could have prepared for what would come next. It started slowly, a rustling in the trees, faint at first, then growing louder, more insistent. The team members froze, their breath caught in their throats as they listened intently. The sound was unmistakable, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the earth beneath their feet. A shadow passed by the edge of their campfire, large and foreboding, and then everything fell eerily silent. Without warning, the sound of branches snapping, footsteps heavy and deliberate, echoed through the forest. Something was moving toward them. "Stay quiet," Dr. Collins ordered, his voice a whisper. The group froze, hearts pounding in their chests as they tried to peer through the darkness. But all they could see were the trees, swaying slightly in the night breeze. The creature was close now, so close they could feel the vibrations in the ground, like thunder rolling beneath their feet. And then, with a deafening crash, a massive shape emerged from the trees, moving so quickly it seemed to blur in the dim light. It was enormous, easily 8 feet tall, covered in thick matted fur. Its face was hidden in shadow, but its silhouette alone was enough to send a chill down their spines. For a moment, everything was still. The team stood frozen, too afraid to move, too afraid to even breathe. The creature was staring at them from the edge of the camp, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Its breath was heavy, labored, and every step it took seemed to shake the ground beneath them. And then it spoke. Or rather, it didn't speak. It mimicked them, mimicked their voices. "Help! Help us!" The words echoed from the creature's throat, distorted and haunting. It was as if the forest itself had learned their voices, twisted them into something monstrous. They had heard the exact same words earlier that day, during their morning briefing, when one of the team members had jokingly asked, "What if we get lost out here? Who will come looking for us?" Now those words, spoken in an eerie, guttural tone, were coming from the creature itself. Dr. Collins' heart raced as he realized that the Sasquatch was no mere animal. It was something far more intelligent, an entity capable of mimicking human speech and behavior. The implications were terrifying. Was this creature an ancient survivor of some lost civilization, or something much darker? But before anyone could react, the Sasquatch lunged forward, moving faster than they could track. It was too late to run, too late to hide. The team had underestimated its speed, its power. One of them, a young researcher named Sarah, was knocked to the ground, her screams swallowed by the immense weight of the creature. Dr. Collins scrambled to his feet, grabbing his flashlight and shining it directly into the creature's eyes. But the beam seemed to do nothing, only make it angrier. It turned and swiped at him with a force that knocked him to the ground, his breath knocked out of him. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the creature vanished back into the shadows, leaving behind only chaos. The team was left in stunned silence, a few members too terrified to move, others too injured to speak. The forest, once again, fell silent. The Sasquatch, the ancient being that had haunted the myths of mankind, had revealed itself, but its story was far from over. It was out there, watching, waiting, and it would never be fully understood by human eyes. As the team staggered back to their camp, their nerves shattered and their bodies bruised, Dr. Collins couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't just encountered a beast. No, they had encountered something far more dangerous, a creature that had learned the art of deception, of survival. It wasn't just watching them anymore, it was learning from them. The myth was no longer just a legend. It was real, and it was only a matter of time before the Sasquatch came for more. The team stumbled back to their campsite, the dark shadows of the forest closing in around them. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, yet it felt colder than before. Dr. Collins could hear his own heart thudding in his chest, his breaths coming in shallow gasps. The terror they had just witnessed still clung to him like a weight, and he could hardly bring himself to speak. Is everyone all right?" he managed to ask, his voice trembling. The other researchers nodded weakly, though their faces were pale, their eyes wide with the raw fear that gripped them. Sarah, the young researcher who had been knocked down, was breathing heavily, clutching her side as though trying to keep herself together. She looked up at Dr. Collins with terror in her eyes. "It had mimicked our voices," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. It knew exactly what we were thinking. I heard it call for help. It was using our own words against us." Dr. Collins nodded, his mind racing. The implications of what they had just encountered were staggering. This creature, this Sasquatch, was not just an ancient relic of folklore. It was intelligent, far more so than they had ever imagined. It could learn, it could observe, and worse yet, it could deceive. He turned to the others, trying to steady his shaking hands. "We need to leave," he said. "Now." But as they began to pack up their things, the silence of the forest grew heavier. The sounds of the night seemed to have been swallowed whole. Even the rustling of the wind in the trees had stopped. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Dr. Collins looked around at the team, feeling an unsettling sense of unease. There was something about the quiet that didn't feel natural. It was wrong. It was too still. And then he heard it again, the same guttural, distorted voice. "Help! Help us!" This time it was closer. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from. The sound echoed through the trees, bending and warping like a nightmare in motion. But it was unmistakable. It was calling to them, mimicking their voices, each word spoken with an eerie clarity that chilled him to the bone. "Get down," Dr. Collins hissed, pulling Sarah down to the ground. The others followed suit, ducking behind trees and equipment. Their hearts were pounding, the terror seeping into every inch of their bodies. The voice continued, louder now. It wasn't just mimicking their words anymore. It was calling out names. Sarah, Collins, Mark. Each name echoed through the trees, sounding like it was coming from every direction. The Sasquatch was no longer hiding in the shadows. It was playing with them, toying with their minds. For a long moment, they could hear nothing but the distorted, mocking calls of the creature, repeating their names over and over again. It was a maddening sound, one that seemed to crack their sanity with each repetition. They huddled together, trembling, too terrified to move. And then, suddenly, the air shifted. The ground trembled beneath them, and a deep growl reverberated through the earth, a sound like an avalanche, a powerful, primal force. Dr. Collins felt it before he saw it, the heavy thud of massive feet pressing against the soft earth. The presence was closing in again, Through the darkness, a shadow loomed, a towering figure moving swiftly toward them. The creature emerged from the trees, its enormous form illuminated by the weak moonlight. The Sasquatch was even larger than they had anticipated, standing at least 10 feet tall, its muscles rippling beneath the thick matted fur. Its face, hidden in shadow, bore the same grotesque, twisted features they had glimpsed earlier, eyes glowing faintly, its jaw hanging open as if to scream. But it didn't scream. Instead, it began to speak again. This time, there was no mistaking it. It wasn't just mimicking their voices. It was mocking them. Fools. It growled, its voice low and gravelly, like the sound of trees being crushed underfoot. You think you can find us, hunt us, but you are only the prey. Dr. Collins' blood ran cold. The Sasquatch was not just playing with them. It was taunting them, toying with their fear. It had been studying them, learning how to break them down psychologically, to wear them down until they were nothing but trembling, helpless victims. He stood frozen, watching as the creature stepped closer. But then something strange happened. The Sasquatch paused, its massive body stiffening, as if it sensed something else. A distant, faint sound echoed through the forest, something that didn't belong. Another growl, but this time, it wasn't from a Sasquatch. It was from something deeper within the forest. For a split second, everything seemed to freeze. The Sasquatch's expression twisted into something unreadable, a flicker of confusion crossing its face. The growl grew louder, and then, from the depths of the forest, something larger than even the Sasquatch emerged. Another creature, even more grotesque, standing on 2 legs like the Sasquatch, but with massive claws and eyes that gleamed with an intelligence that sent chills through Dr. Collins' spine. The battle for survival had just begun. As the creature took its first step into their camp, Dr. Collins and his team realized they were not the hunters anymore. They were the hunted. The forest had always been home to these creatures, and now they would never escape. The new creature, even larger and more menacing than the Sasquatch, stepped forward, its claws scraping the earth as it advanced with deliberate precision. The air around them grew heavier with every passing second, suffocating them with a presence they couldn't escape. This was no ordinary forest. This was a hunting ground, and they were the prey. Dr. Collins' heart raced, his instincts screaming at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The trees around them stood like silent sentinels, their towering trunks offering no escape. He turned to the others, but he could see the fear in their eyes. They knew as well as he did that the time for running had passed. We need to fight back. Sarah whispered urgently, clutching Dr. Collins' arm. Her face was pale, and her voice cracked with fear, but there was a fire in her eyes. She wasn't ready to give up. None of them were. Dr. Collins nodded, barely able to form the words. The weapons we have to try. Before he could finish, the larger creature let out a deep, bone-rattling roar that echoed through the forest, shaking the ground beneath their feet. It was followed by the screech of the Sasquatch, a sound that seemed almost pained, as if it were both warning them and retreating. The larger creature advanced, its muscles rippling beneath its dark fur, eyes glowing with intelligence and malice. It was as though it knew their every move before they made it. "Stay together," Dr. Collins said, his voice shaky but resolute. He reached for the flare gun strapped to his waist. His fingers trembled as he grabbed the handle and aimed it at the larger creature. He fired. The flare shot through the night like a streak of light, its hissing sound filling the forest as it struck the creature. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The creature halted, its head jerking back, and the glow in its eyes flickered. But instead of retreating, it bellowed in fury, swiping at the air as the flare disintegrated on contact. Then it charged. "Run!" Dr. Collins shouted, but it was too late. The creature was upon them in a heartbeat, its enormous arms sweeping through the air, knocking over tents, equipment, and everything in its path. The team scattered, but the creature was faster, more relentless. It didn't matter how far they ran. It was inevitable. Dr. Collins could hear the shouts of his team, the sounds of crashing, and the terrible, gurgling growls of the Sasquatch and its companion. Sarah, too, had vanished into the trees, and he lost sight of her in an instant. All he could do was run. But something felt wrong. The trees, the ground beneath his feet, they felt alive, like they were closing in on him, shifting to trap him in a cage of twisted branches and shadows. No matter how much he ran, no matter how fast, he couldn't escape. The forest itself seemed to be part of the hunt. He stumbled, his legs giving way as his body collided with the ground. His breath came in ragged gasps, and when he looked up, the Sasquatch was standing above him, its massive, hulking form casting a shadow over him like a nightmare made flesh. It stared at him, its face a mask of rage and hunger, and then, to his horror, it spoke again. "Help us." The voice was not its own. It was their voice, the voice of his team, twisted and distorted. It was the same voice he had heard when they first encountered it, except now it was calling for help. For the first time, Dr. Collins realized that the Sasquatch had not been trying to kill them out of malice. It had been trying to warn them. The creature turned away, its massive form disappearing into the trees. The silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence this time, one filled with dread, one that pressed down on his chest as he lay there, broken and defeated. Dr. Collins didn't move. The weight of what had happened, what he had seen, was too much. The hunt was not over. They were still being watched. And somewhere, out there in the dark forest, the Sasquatch was still waiting. In the days that followed, rescue teams were sent out to recover the bodies of the missing researchers. They found nothing but wreckage, the remnants of their camp, torn apart, scattered across the forest floor like debris from a storm. There were no bodies, no signs of life, but the forest remained undisturbed, as though the creatures who had haunted it were just a myth, a story to scare children and the superstitious. Yet the locals knew better. They whispered of the Sasquatch, the wood people, the creatures who had lived hidden for centuries, waiting for the right moment. And they knew that they would always be out there, watching from the shadows, waiting for the next group of outsiders who dared to trespass into their world. The myth had become real, and as long as the forest stood, the Sasquatch would never be forgotten.